So it just so coincided that, so you know what is going on now, and March the 8th is coming soon, so we decided not to postpone anything, but just to come here to see what you've got here. How do you use it? What are the prospects of the center? I have to say it is impressive. Masha showed me so how they manage it, how they handle it. So under her supervision, I also played around with some joysticks. It's good, especially since they're new generation of the simulators. So I heard it from the head and I saw it with my own eyes. Obviously, we have to use this meeting to discuss, I guess, about the prospects of the developing the industry, to talk about the today's circumstances, so we can't avoid talking about that. That's given. But first of all, I would like to congratulate you all on the upcoming holiday, March the 8th, to wish all the best, all your colleagues, to all the women in Russia. I will address them a little later, to all of them. But now I would like to say, if we talk about the industry where you work in, that you belong to, I think there are more than 70,000 females, there are pilots, more than 200 first pilots, second pilots. Well, I'm not even talking about flight attendants, because that's special crew, special case. And everyone always had a lot of respect for the aviation industry, and for the females in aviation even more so. I think early last century we had first women in aviation. They really excelled during the Great Patriotic War. We know all these famous names of female regiments who fought during that war. And still we have female women all over, dispatchers, engineers, flight attendants, pilots. So it's a really strong women presence that complements the male part of the aviation industry. So I would suggest to stop with an introduction with that. I think it would be more useful and it would be more concrete if I am to take your questions. So let's switch to that. So once again, I congratulate you on the upcoming holiday of March the 8th. Thank you. So please, are there any questions, or we will just drink some tea? We've got questions. Good afternoon, Mr. Putin. I'm a second pilot of Airbus, and my question is about the situation in Ukraine. We all support your actions, the special military operation that is unfolding there, proceeding there. And the main question that we have, every one of us have, why this operation started, and was it possible to avoid it? We understand and we support your actions, but our hearts are concerned about our families, about our loved ones who live in Ukraine. So we know that civilians do not suffer, but please reassure us, what is at the end of this path? What will this operation be, when this operation be over? I will try to be brief, so I will try to start at the very gist of the issue. I said that at the beginning of the operation, and I used to tell it before this decision was made. A difficult decision, I have to admit. So what is it about? After the coup d'etat, anti-constitutional coup d'etat, that was actively supported, unfortunately, by the Western countries. So, and they are not even hiding that. They said directly that they spent $5 billion. They were handing out hot pies and so on and so forth. And instead of bringing the situation back, even if it went out of control, even if it got too excessive, so they planned one thing, but it turned out differently, still, they had to bring it back to the political vein, especially since the beginning of this coup d'etat. The 3 foreign ministers came to Kiev and signed agreement with the then authorities, and they guaranteed They were guarantors of those agreements, that it was going to remain political. But nothing of that happened, so they overthrew the government. They supported those who overthrew the government, and then you all know what happened next in Crimea, in the southeast of Ukraine, and Donbass, where people didn't support that coup. So in Crimea, people voted at the referendum to become part of the Russian Federation, and of course we couldn't help but supporting that, especially since they were threatened by nationalists. And I'm going to say now that we were right back then. We have evidence of that. And then at the same time, events started to unfold in Donbass. Where did it lead to? The people who started resisting to what was happening, so they were persecuted. And there, in those territories, Kiev authorities launched a military operation, two punitive, large-scale military operation using heavy weaponry, using aviation. So they were bombing, they were shelling Donetsk squares from the skies with tanks, with planes. So both these military campaigns, they failed. So they were defeated. After that, the so-called Minsk agreements were signed, or the complex package of measures, as they are also called. And it showed the path of the peaceful resolution of this conflict. And we did everything we could to follow this path, to restore the territorial integrity of Ukraine and to protect the interests of the people who live there. What did they demand? They demanded elementary things, basic things, the right to speak their native language. In this case, it was Russian language. To live, to follow their traditions. Nothing special. Absolutely nothing. But no, so they blocked those territories, they put embargo on them, so they canceled the banking system, they stopped paying welfares and retirement pensions, so they were just handing out some small sums. Still, they had to go through a lot to get those pensions. So maybe I will be too direct because I'm just thinking of it now. The situation makes me speak things like that, talk about things like that, because you see, when in one region and in another region, things like that are happening, when people are getting wounded and killed, and then, well, that's a separate issue, and the local authorities have to deal with that. And then they start killing those animals, they shooting them down. But people in Donbass are not stray dogs. 13 to 14,000 were killed throughout those years. More than 500 children were killed. But what's especially intolerable is that this so-called civilized West prefers not to notice that, not to pay attention all these years, all these 8 years. And recently, the Kyiv authorities started saying it publicly, directly, that they are not going to implement the Minsk agreements. They were told it from the TV screens, online. They were saying that publicly. We don't like it, we're not going to implement it. And they were accusing Russia that we are the ones who are not implementing that. But that makes no sense. It's absurd. They are calling the white the black, and they're calling black the white. And then it got worse. All of a sudden, they started saying that they were going... Well, they were saying about that for a long time. But they became more and more vocal about admitting Ukraine to NATO. Do you imagine what it could result in, and still can? Because in accordance with the treaty of these organizations, all the other members of the alliance are supposed to support any member in case of the conflict. No one admits that Crimea belongs to Russia, so now they are fighting in Donbass, the same they will do in Crimea, and then we would have to fight the entire alliance. Do you understand what would be the consequences? I think everyone understands that, and now they are talking about acquiring nuclear status, acquiring nuclear weapons. We can't just pretend that we do not notice that. And we know how the so-called West behaves in regard of Russia. Ukraine, since Soviet times, have nuclear capabilities, they have materials, they have launchers, they have rockets. So they have factories that were building ballistic missiles, intercontinental missiles for the Soviet Union, so they can use those capabilities, those capacities, and they will help them from across the ocean. And after that, they will say that we do not recognize their nuclear status, they did it themselves, they will monitor those complexes, and from that very second, the fate of Russia will be absolutely different. Because if that's the case, our strategic adversary, they don't even need to have ballistic intercontinental missiles. They will just hold us at gunpoint next to our borders. How can we fail to see that, to notice that? That's a real threat. That's not just some nonsense that we made up. And the boys that are fighting there, laying down their lives, they are laying down their lives. They are fighting for the future of our children. That's obvious. And people who do not want to understand that, especially from the current authorities, they have to understand that if they continue to do what they have been doing, and I've told that before, because then the future of the Ukrainian state will come under question. And if that happens, that would be on their conscience. And what's happening now? I have already said what our objective there. First of all, to protect people living in Donbass. How? By demilitarizing and denazifying Ukraine. By making it neutral. Why? Because if they are neutral, then they won't join NATO. And it is said in their constitution that they will join NATO. That's in their constitution. That's what it says. And what denazification is. So I'm talking with my Western counterparts. You also have radicals. Yes, we do. But we do not have them in our government. And everyone knows that they have. Yes, maybe we have some jerks that are running around with these mottos and slogans. But do we support it at the government level? Do we have torchlight processions in Moscow or in other large cities with swastikas, with the torches, like in 1930s in Germany? Do we have anything like that? But they do, and they support them. Do we support those who killed Russians, Jewish, Polacks during the war? Are we making heroes out of them? And they do. They are. And what is happening now is also very important. Look. They have taken hostage foreign nationals. In Sumy and Kharkov, more than 6,000 young people, students. So they gathered them at the railway station, and they are keeping them there for 3 days already. 3 days they are keeping these kids there. Everyone were told. We told that to the authorities of Ukraine. Yes, we will deal with that. We told about that to the European leaders. I personally talked to them. Yes, we will influence them. We told the UN Secretary General about that. Yes, we will deal with that. No one did anything. And they treat their own citizens even worse. They are hiding behind their backs, using them as human shields. Look at Mariupol. That's happening as we speak, just right now. We've got a phone call from the government, from Kiev, our military. Open humanitarian corridors for our citizens to live. Our military reacted right away. We stopped all hostilities, so we were just observing what was going on. But they are not letting anyone out. No one is allowed to leave. They are hiding behind their backs, using them as human shields. So what can you call such people? Neo-Nazis, obviously. And we also see militants from the Middle East, from some European states. We can hear them when on the radio, when they talk to each other. They use the so-called jihad mobiles when they put a lot of explosives on a vehicle and then they just send it. But they fail, and they won't succeed. But who are they if not neo-Nazis? And They destroy their own country, their own state with these actions. So one of our key demands is to demilitarize the country. We are helping people, citizens of Donbass, by achieving neutral status of Ukraine, by demilitarizing the country, because we have to understand where are the weapons, who is controlling them, because a lot of things can happen. And we are talking about various options. And we are talking also with the Kiev government. During talks and negotiations in Belarus, I would like to thank President Lukashenko for organizing these talks. Our proposals are on the table. So Kiev negotiators know that, so hopefully they will make a positive decision. So please, next one. Yulia Shvitka, second pilot, Airflot Company. Mr. Putin, hello. Hello. I've got a question about the current situation because there are a lot of rumors about martial law, about recruiting volunteers, about using conscripts, about sending additional conscripts to Ukraine. Could you give us a definite answer? Are you going to declare martial law? And are you going to use conscripts and send them to Ukraine? So a lot of what is happening now, what we're seeing now, these are different ways of fighting Russia, and the sanctions that are being imposed, they're a lot like declaring war. Thank God it hasn't come to that yet, but I think everyone understands what kind of consequences it's fraught with. So our so-called partners have to understand that even though they make these outrageous statements, like Foreign Minister of the UK did that when she said NATO can get involved into the conflict. And right away we had to make this decision about putting our containment deterrence forces on high alert, on special regime. But then there was a different reaction. They said they didn't really mean it. But no one really disavowed those statements. Anyone could have said something to us about that. That was just her personal opinion. Pay no mind to that. No one said anything. So what we were supposed to do, what we were supposed to think about that? Obviously, we took it as a signal, as a message of some kind, and we had to react. So now answering your question about volunteers, about conscripts, about martial law, etc. Martial law is introduced in the country according to law by the decree of the president, and it has to be endorsed by the Council of the Federation if there is external aggression, including in certain areas where there is a military activity. But that's not the situation, and hopefully that will not be the situation. That's first. Secondly, as for the special regime, there is the special regime, there is a martial law, but then again, this special regime is also introduced by the decree and with the endorsement of the Council Federation if there is some large-scale domestic threats. And there is another regime, the emergency situation regime. Usually it is introduced regionally. It can be introduced nationally if there is some natural disasters or some other kind of catastrophes. Thank God we have nothing like that. We do not plan to implement any special regime, any special situation in Russia, and there is no need to. Yes, we can see, like I said, there are attempts to stir up the sentiment in the society, which serves as a testimony to the fact that we do not just deal with common people, we deal with neo-Nazis Now they are saying what they like or not like in the actions of our people in Ukraine. And people in Ukraine who express the same stance, same sentiments as liberal part of our society here. We already have evidence of that. They are just seized on the street and killed. Our secret service are collecting this data, gathering this information. They are getting killed. And our intelligence are protesting. And the same people, similar people who are saying something in support of Russia, they are getting killed right on the street without any legal action. Now about martial law. Once again, it is introduced if there is external aggression, if there is any military threat. Hopefully it will not happen despite some statements made by the Western officials. Now we hear that the no-fly zone should be introduced above the territory of Ukraine. It is impossible to do above the territory of Ukraine. It can only be done from some adjacent countries, but any steps in this regard will be seen by us as participation in the armed conflict by the country from where the threat will be posed to our security. That very second, we will see this country as the participant of a military conflict, and we won't care member of which alliance or bloc they will be. I apologize for saying member. I hope there is understanding of that, and it won't come to that. In this operation, there are only professional military officers and soldiers who have contracts. There are not a single conscript, and we do not plan to use them, and we are not going to. So once again, in this operation, there are only men who made this choice by themselves voluntarily to defend their homeland, and they are achieving that, doing that with honor. And we have right to say that because I have just said that when I answered the first question. The same goes for those who are now used during the reserve drills. So that was happening always. So that's just a normal thing, but we are not going to use them to attract them, to make them part of this operation. So they will not be a part of this operation. We have enough forces, we have enough means to achieve objectives that we have with using only professional army, professional soldiers. And I can say a lot about the operation itself. I know there are a lot of rumors. I don't have a lot of time to read that, but I have a lot of reports that there are a lot of rumors about how it's going, but all the analysts see what is happening, so I'm not divulging any secret here. There could have been a lot of ways to do that. So partially answering your question, we could have helped the Donbas armies at the engagement line. We could have just sent the Russian army there. But then from that side, I'm talking about that support from the West, of the nationalists and radicals, then they would have gotten all the support with the material, with all kinds of resources, with ammo, with weapons. So that's why our General Staff of the Defense Ministry chose another path. So the first thing we did, we destroyed the entire military infrastructure. Well, not entire, but partially we did. The weapons depots, ammo depots, the aviation, the air defense systems. Well, it takes some time to destroy air defense systems because you are peaceful civilians, but you know about aviation, so it takes time to do that, but that part is almost completed. That's why now we hear these demands to introduce the no-fly zone, but that would lead to disastrous consequences, not only for Europe, but for the entire world. But I think those people who might think about that, they have this understanding as well. So that's the path we chose. That was absolutely right decision, as it turned out. And our military are doing everything to provide security for the civilians, to ensure their security. But those bandits, those neo-Nazis, they have no mercy for the people. They even kill their own fellow servicemen who do not want to resist with weapons. We have these facts as well. Nationalists, these Bandera followers, Nazis, there is no other word for them. They killed their own brothers in arms. So in every unit, they have those nationalists, dozens of them. And that's what they do. So they are acting brutally. And once again, I would like to reiterate, no conscripts, no people who are invited to be part of the drills. We're not going to use the reservists or conscripts during the armed conflict. And I believe that our army will reach all the objectives set for it. I have not a shade of a doubt about it, not for a second. And the operation, the way it is unfolding, proves that it is going according to schedule, according to plan, just the way it was planned by the General Staff. And as for volunteers or some young people who come to the conscription sites, we are grateful for their patriotism, for their willingness to support the country, to support the armed forces. But I guess the very fact of them coming, wanting to volunteer, is important in itself. But we do not need their assistance yet, and I'm sure that we are not going to need it. But looking at the camera, I want them to hear what I'm saying now. Thank you. So let's go on then. Shaposhnikova Kristina, the pilot of Airbus aircraft. I've got a question that concerns a lot of people. Are you going to use any measures to support families and socially vulnerable citizens and budget employees? And a lot of people wonder about the support for our businessmen and employers because they create jobs, they pay salaries. Thank you for your question. Well, first of all the welfares are going to be indexed the way it is supposed to be. Pensions and welfare, social welfares, they all will be indexed. Now about the business. I think under the conditions where we are now, there could be only one solution. Maximum economic freedom for all the people involved in business. We have already made a number of decisions. Now the government wants to extend these support measures. We are talking about lifting restrictions on entrepreneurship. I'm talking about changes and adjustment to the criminal code, and I support the decision that has been made. There should be no criminal persecution for economic crimes, especially if they reimburse the damage they did. Secondly, as for tax crimes, yes, so there should be no fiscal crimes, tax crimes, but we have agreed that criminal cases in such situations could only be started if there is a request from the tax service, and that's how we want to do that. That's the path we are going to follow. Those who are involved in business, it is very important. People know about that. entrepreneurs, they've been asking about that for some time now, so they will hear me now. I hope they will appreciate that. And the second question was, so I was scribbling down for myself, but it's easier to ask you again. Oh, yes, about support for the families. We have created an entire system, support system for families, especially families with children. We have welfare for the children from 0 to 1.5 years, then from 1.5 years to 3 years, and from 3 to 7 to pregnant women, future mothers, those in dire financial situation are also supported, and we also support the families with the children, well, single-parent families with children from 8 to 18-year-olds. Our goal is to create a uniform system from 8 to 18 years old. In some regions, they give support. In other regions, they don't. So what is the objective we have? To have a uniform, streamlined, absolutely clear, transparent support system for future mothers and all the children until they turn 18. We have already come up with a plan to implement this project. So this very morning, we discussed that with the government and with the social bloc, with the finance ministry, with the administration. This morning, we've been busy with that. We are preparing these measures, and in the near future, I don't want to be ahead of myself. I will say what would be the next steps in building this uniform system, but we are going to follow this path, to walk this road, and all the system from pregnancy to the childbirth to 18 years old, we will build this system, and in the near future we will announce what will be the steps, what will be the decisions in this regard. Victoria Kartsova, flight attendant, Airflot. That's the question I've got. The difficult situation in the aviation industry started with the pandemic. There were fewer flights, and by the beginning of 2022, we had this hope that the flights would be resumed in the former volume. But now from the news, we see one country after another shutting down their skies for the Russian airlines. Yes, this situation is bad for both parties. For example, how can you fly from London to Tokyo? That will be very difficult. And that happened before, during the Soviet times, but we wanted to understand, in your opinion, for how much longer this situation will keep. Victoria, it doesn't depend on us. It depends on those who do that, and they do it to their own detriment. And I think they don't really like doing that. They do that because their government is exerting pressure on them. These Siberian flight routes that you are hinting at, if they are not flying across Siberia because we're closing our skies as well, they will have to extend travel time, and they will have to spend more fuel, they will have to increase the ticket prices, and so on and so forth. My understanding is that if the situation changes, these things will also change. As for the pandemic period that you mentioned, now look, during the pandemic, we have decreased the domestic air travel by 88%. And external air travel by more than 90%. Almost everything was closed. So we have this experience of such stressful situations, but last year the domestic air travel was 20% more than before the pandemic. I might be mistaken, but I think we're talking about 87.5 million passengers traveled by planes, which is 20% more than we had before the pandemic. So what's left to do now? We will increase the domestic air travel. So wherever we have a chance to fly abroad, we will. We will do our best to change the situation. Yes, there are some downsides because there are inconvenience for the people, but then we will be able to develop our own infrastructure, our own aviation. We will have new airplanes like Il-114-300, Baikal, and so on. We will continue developing the network of aerodromes. We have the program to develop it. I think it has 57 airports and 60 events. And by events, I mean everything that has to do with improving infrastructure, building new runways, and so on and so forth. I'm talking about territorial connectivity of the country. We have a lot to do, but that would be an additional impetus for developing industry and infrastructure like we did when we paid special attention to developing agriculture. $25 billion last year, I think, we earned by exporting the agricultural goods. Just recently, it seemed impossible, but we did that. But that's not even about the volume of export. The more important thing is that we satisfy all our needs in the agricultural commodities and foodstuffs. So in this sense, so that's a blessing in disguise, as they say. And the same will be done in the aircraft industry as well. Good afternoon. My name is Yulia Vasilevska. I'm a pilot in Aeroflot. I would like to start by mentioning the plane that everyone knows, MS-21. This plane is obviously good because if we talk about technical specifications and other specifications, it is no worse than the same planes in the West. But still, our airlines would not be able to replace all the Boeings and Airbuses. I'm a Airbus pilot, so I'm concerned, I'm worried about the future of our aircraft fleet. So in this regard, I have the question: how the aircraft industry will keep on using planes, because leasing companies, they want to return our planes. That's their intention. And how the spare parts, essential spare parts, will be procured for timely maintenance and repair of aircraft, of our aircraft fleet. Well, first of all, I would like to say, you mentioned that MS-21 is no worse, no inferior to the Western planes. I think it's better, actually better. So it has more legroom. It's more comfortable in between the chairs. There are more space for luggage, so it is better. And for the previous few years, our competitors, including the US, so they weren't really behaving themselves in a nice way. So they took some goods, and allegedly they were saying they were dual-use goods, and they put them into the sanction lists. Why did they do that? Because they have their own products, they have their own planes, which are inferior to MS-21. But in the end, eventually, we did it ourselves. We invented it ourselves, things that they wanted to ban from us. And it's even better than their parts. But unfortunately, all these projects were moved to the right on the timeline, so we implemented this project a little bit later, 1 year, 1.5 years. So the same will be done in other industries. You know how they say, we are waiting for the flood to start building our ark. So that's just about us. When we are forced to do something, then when we really start to act. The same goes for MS-21. So there's a PD-14 engine it uses. So it's not even inferior. It's superior in a lot of parameters. Yes, we need some more time, couple of months, and we will build an airplane by ourselves, manufactured completely in Russia. As for the leasing companies and spare parts, I'm not going to go into detail now, but your former manager, now the transport ministry, so I'm getting reports from him almost daily. And in overall, I support what he tells me. So let's give him a chance to negotiate with our partners. I hope they will come to terms. Because that's in their interests as well. But I believe that we will continue flying. Thank you. Anything else? Natalia Gorbunova, flight attendant, Aeroflot. Now, we really want to help our country and our industries, so we need to fly more inside the country. So how will the regional aviation develop in the near future, in the upcoming years? I have already mentioned that that's one of the most important objectives that we have, the territorial connectivity. So first of all, we have to have domestically produced aircraft starting from L410, 62 seats, I think, its capacity, Il-113-300, MS-21. Masha has just taken me to the simulator of Superjet 100. We are going to continue developing that. If we can localize some production, we will do that. We will try our best to do that. The second component is airports. To fly, we need some runways to take off from, to land on. So we have an extensive program, and more than 60 items on this program is being implemented. I'm talking about building new airports, new runways, and we will continue going along this path. And thirdly, we are going to continue to subsidize long-haul flights. First of all, I'm talking about the Far East, and company that is operational there, Aurora. Yes, that's right, this year. We have increased subsidies 5 times. So it's 6 billion rubles now. If there is need to, we will increase it even more. So we will try to achieve this objective so that you didn't have to fly from one small settlement to another via Moscow. So we are trying to resolve this consistently. Anything else? Good afternoon, Mr. Putin. I'm the training crew pilot, Aeroflot. So the pandemic affected all of us, but the aviation industry survived. And last year, the domestic air travel even exceeded the volume of before the pandemic with the support of the state. Yes, 20%, which is a lot and sufficient. So what can we expect? How will we live in the future? How will the state support our industry? So it seems that we are going in circles a little bit, because I have already answered that, and I have just talked about subsidizing the air travel in the Far East as well. We are going to extend this support, so we have already extended 5 times. We are going to develop infrastructure to build our own planes, and we will do everything to achieve the connectivity inside the country on a good level, so that our people could really feel it, because not only citizens want this, even though that's our objective number one, our economy needs that, because it concerns not only the passenger travel, it's also about the business connection, if you can fly on time and leave on time, because I know it by myself. For example, when there is some large-scale projects, the expert specialists, they always keep that in mind. If you can get there quick, and if you can leave this site quickly, return to Moscow, St. Petersburg, Kazan, other large cities, because maybe you have some business matters there, or you want to go back to your families, if we're talking about northern regions. So we are developing all that. So once again, I would like to congratulate you on the upcoming holiday, and I would like to wish you all the best. Thank you for this warm conversation. Thank you.